Well, hello and good morning, everybody. This is Jeremiah, and we are doing a webinar on LandFX installation today. Got a couple housekeeping things for you real quick. At the top of your screen, there's a little view options. I sure like to click that and exit full screen mode, just so I can get to something else on my computer if I need to. And speaking of getting to something else, definitely click the Q&A button at the bottom. Even just click it right now, get your question box situated. So that way it's going to be a lot quicker when you need to type in a question. You're going to be able to get to anything you type in, but also you should be able to see any answered questions that anyone else typed in. So it's a nice little resource. It's good to have that little pulled up and ready. Other than that, we are going to be talking about installing LandFX, which is going to be kind of fun in that it's complicated. The reason why it's complicated is because LandFX is not just simply an app. It's not just an app. You can't just simply install it and then uninstall it. And there you go. Fundamentally, it is in charge of content, and it's in charge of content that you're going to create as you use it. So the longer you use it, you're going to create more content, primarily data, but also blocks and other things. And so we run into a couple of problems. One is that Microsoft Windows compliance, an installer is supposed to install to the program files folder. But if you have a multi-user office, you need to share this content. So it really leaves us in a pickle with how to create an installer. And then, of course, adding cloud options to it, we end up with basically a lot of options. And fundamentally, the decision process between these options is, where do you want the data stored, and what level of risk do you want, and how much cloud reliance do you want, and so on. But that is all what we're going to be walking you over this next hour. You're going to be very, very armed to handle even the most complicated LandFX installs. And this webinar is being recorded, so you'll have that available as a resource. That's enough of my yibber yabber, and I'm going to get this handed over to Bennett to take it away.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jeremiah. So as Jeremiah said, we're going to be talking about the various different ways that you can set up LandFX for your particular needs for your work environment. Make sure that you're getting the best use of the software possible. Without, delving into that much more, because I feel like he covered it pretty well, let's go ahead and get started here. First things first, I'm not Seth. I know some of you may have been excited to hear from Seth today. Unfortunately, he wasn't feeling too well, so I'm going to fill in for him. So what we're going to cover in today's webinar, we're going to talk about the LandFX installer itself, what it includes, what it loads onto your system, and why it's so important. We're also going to talk about your work environment and how you can tailor the install, or what you need to or should look at when you're preparing to install LandFX. We're going to cover local installs. This means you're storing the database file on your local systems. So you're going to be maintaining that database. We're also going to cover the LandFX cloud. I'm sure many of you have heard us talk about this before. It's something we've been pushing out for a little while now. It's definitely what we recommend. It offloads a lot from your end, and we're going to talk about all of that at that point. Shared online folder. Now, this one's really important. We're really leaning towards shared online folder these days, just because it makes it really easy to share files, both with multiple users and multiple workstations. So that's going to be a hot topic for today. Cloud and shared. Now, this is really combining cloud data with the shared online folder setup. So they really go hand in hand, and they complement each other very well. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So to start with, here we're going to talk about the LandFX installer itself. So this is the media you're going to download to actually get yourself set up with our software package. So basically what makes up the LandFX installer are these three components. You have the database here. It's either going to be cloud or local. So there's multiple options here. The folder itself, now this contains any LandFX data that you work with. So it's going to be your plant blocks, your irrigation blocks, site, your details, any CTB files, etc. Those all go within the LandFX folder. So this is a folder that has to be maintained, and any user who accesses LandFX is going to be reading and writing to this folder. The installer also includes, or at least links to, our cloud content libraries. So regardless of whether you select cloud data or local data for your database type, you're still going to need an internet connection to access our cloud-based libraries, just because there's so many. It's much more efficient, much faster, and a much better way to get you the latest content at all times to have it all cloud-based. So as you utilize these components, symbols, blocks, etc., they're downloaded on demand from our cloud libraries. So the LandFX installer that you'll download from our website, it's our software package to load up both the LandFX folder and the database, depending on your database type that you choose. You need it because as we update things, as we update the software, it's the best way to deploy those updates, and it's the best way to get, so like if you do local data, there's more components than just the folder that need to be installed, and it handles all of that. So like it shows here, it's installing both the LandFX folder and the database type that you've chosen. So the LandFX installer, also known as FX Server installer, because that's what it's actually installing. It's installing the server component. Now, even if you're doing a single user installation, you still have that server component because it serves up the files and the components that you need to make the software work. Just single user installs it on your machine as opposed to putting it on like an Office server or a shared online folder. This installer creates the LandFX folder itself. By default, it's going to install this to the C drive. We just throw it on C LandFX. It's the easiest location for multiple users on the same workstation to access, if you have a shared workstation, for instance. But you can definitely change this, and we recommend you do, especially if you have another location where you store files, say like a secondary hard drive, because we've seen a lot of users have multiple drives in a system. They have a lot of data. It happens. It's going to create all of the data needed to run the software package. So you're going to get the LandFX folder like we keep talking about. And if you choose local data with a multi-user install, it's also going to go through all the setup of MySQL, which we're going to get into here shortly. Like it says, or like we've said before, the LandFX folder stores all of your hatches, your details, your blocks, your fonts, and your symbols. So it's crucial to have this folder in a location that's secure and easily accessible. So moving on to the work environments. Now this is crucial because depending on your particular work environment, you may have one user working from one machine, or you may have one user working from 2 to 4 machines. You may have 5 users using the same machine, or maybe you have 30 to 40 users. So taking into consideration your work environment is going to help you deploy the best LandFX setup to make sure that everything works smoothly and all of your users can collaborate easily. So first thing to look at here, are you the only user? If you are, then a single user installation with cloud data would be ideal. This setup gets you up and running in the fastest manner possible, and it sets you up with the cloud database, which offloads some of the overhead from your local system. It's a little bit technical, but we're going to get into that. One computer and one user who needs to access the data anywhere. Again, single user is going to fit that bill well because, well, your data's on your computer. So anywhere your computer goes, you have it. It's there. It's ready to go. Now, if you find yourself transferring data to different computers rather frequently, that's when you're going to get into the territory of a multi-user setup. Now, multi-user can also apply to multiple workstations. So you can be a single user working with multiple stations, and a multi-user is still going to fit that bill nicely. Again, the single user, but multiple computers. Now, if your computer dies, what about your database? That's something to take into account when you're deciding between local data or cloud data. If your computer goes down, or if it goes missing, or disaster strikes, what do you have prepared for those situations? These are all things to take into consideration when you're planning your install. So jumping right into the LandFX installation options, we're going to start off with the single user install. This is going to be the best fit for one user or one workstation running LandFX. You have the two database types you see here: local data, which stores the database on that individual system. For single user installations, it uses SQLite, it's very lightweight, it's very efficient, but it does not support, or it's not recommended to have multiple users accessing that at a time. So it's solely for one-man shop, one machine installations. You also have cloud data, which utilizes our cloud data offering, which essentially moves that database into our cloud services. Multi-user installations, these are going to be preferred when you have a shared LandFX folder with either multiple workstations or multiple users. Again, you have the two database offerings. Local data, however, this time is handled by MySQL. This does support multiple queries at the same time, so you can have 5, 10, 15, 30 people all working with LandFX, modifying that database at one time. Cloud data, the same rule applies. A single user. It's hosted on our cloud services and can be accessed by X amount of users. So both of those apply. Now, the shared online folder, this is really the up and coming runner with LandFX. This is what we really recommend. And reason being, it works beautifully for all configurations, multiple users, multiple computers, or a single user. And one of the most beautiful things about the shared online folder is you have the local installation that's on your computer and is real-time synced to the cloud. So you have an off-site copy of it at all times, it's great for data retention, but we're going to get into that here. Okay, so first, let's talk about local data installs. First couple of reasons to choose local data, and I mean the main one here is going to be an unreliable internet connection. If you live in the boonies and you have internet that kind of comes and goes throughout the day, I myself live out in the boondocks, so I'm on a point-to-point access point, which is great when it works. But a little storm comes up and I could lose internet for 4 or 5 hours. So that's really going to be the main selling point for local data these days, is just unreliable internet connection. One of the things that comes with it is going to be increased overhead. You have to have a server or workstation that's running your database, and you have to make sure that it's properly maintained and protected. Another thing to take into consideration with local data is the cost of real-time offsite backup. It's crucial that when you're talking about a database, you have this backed up, and not just on site, but you want an off-site copy, because we've seen it plenty of times before. Disaster strikes and people can lose, their home and their office. Look at Hurricane Katrina. Lots of people lost their home and their office. So if you have your data stored in one location or split between those two, it's still potential to lose all that data. So definitely something to consider when you're doing local data is having an off-site real-time backup. So with single user local data, your default install that you'll see here is going to go on the C drive, just in the LandFX folder. So this is what a vanilla installation is going to give you. Again, default is to the C drive, just right on the root. You can, of course, change this. Like I said, if you have a secondary drive or somewhere else that you prefer to install these, you can definitely move it there. It allows you to choose during the installation, so keep an eye on that. This is going to be one of the most common installation options if you're looking for local data. As you can see, it loads up an SQLite database file, which goes under program data. So everything needed to run the LandFX plugin is local on this system. So wherever the system goes, it can use LandFX. Just when it comes to sharing, like if you were to, for instance, create a custom block, or you created a custom symbol, that's on this station only. So if you have two workstations and you go, so if you have a laptop at home and a desktop at work, and you work on both, if you create a custom block on the one at home, you have to manually copy that block and bring it with you to work and place it in the LandFX folder so that it's accessible. So this installation is really, really a good fit for if you have one person, one workstation, and you don't move around at all. With multi-user LandFX installations, this applies to multiple users or multiple workstations. It's going to create the LandFX folder that we talked about. However, this time you're probably going to place it on a file server. So it's going to be in an accessible location to multiple people. It creates the local database, which in this case is using MySQL. As well as creating the database, it sets up the MySQL service so that you can actually utilize that database. These are all components that are going to be running on whatever system you install this on that have to be maintained. Full read and write permission is required to the LandFX folder. So anytime one of your users loads up LandFX and they go to place a new piece of irrigation equipment in a drawing, it has to download that block that they're going to use from our cloud server and place it in the LandFX folder. So full read and write permissions are crucial because they are constantly reading and writing data to the LandFX folder. I know this slide is a little bit busy, but this is to showcase exactly what is loaded up when you do a multi-user local data installation. So to start with, you have the MySQL server component there on the right. This gets installed by our installer. So it's another application that has to run on this computer. So you always have this running, and you also have the potential for something to go wrong with it. So it's something else to maintain. You have the MySQL database, which lives in the LandFX folder there on the left. So this is another file that adds another level of complexity, another level of maintenance, and security requirements. So you want to make sure that this is protected and safe and secure, and nothing else has access to it, because if something reads and or something tries to access it while it's being used and it doesn't like it, you have the potential for the database to just go, well, I don't know what's happening, we're done. Also, you have the MySQL service. Now this is basically, it's running all the time on the computer. So if anything happens to this service, if it stops for whatever reason, your users will no longer be able to access any LandFX projects, preferences, or templates. So it's crucial that that remain running at all times. By hosting this yourself, it's just one more thing that you have to maintain and keep an eye on. You also have to have firewall exceptions. So depending on how involved you are with your security on your local network, it's one more thing that you have to keep an eye on, make sure it's set up properly, and doesn't create a loophole or an issue if you try to access anything remotely. So now we're going to talk about the LandFX cloud. And I know cloud is a scary concept for a lot of people because, well, I mean, they don't physically have their files on hand, and who knows what's happening with them. It's a spooky concept, but we're going to break it down, simplify it, and show you that really anytime you're using LandFX, you're already using the cloud, whether or not you're on cloud data. So the LandFX cloud broken down, we use AWS services. So our cloud servers are Amazon servers. They are replicated all across the globe. So depending on where you're physically located, the software automatically ports you to the nearest server to ensure you have the quickest connection times and the lowest latency, so that when you go to place an object in your drawing, it downloads and places right away. You don't have a delay. You don't have to wait for it to go all the way across the world and then come back to you. It also means you have failover. So if anything happens, say you're connecting to a server on the West Coast and that server goes down, it will automatically port you over to the nearest server without any interruption in service. So you won't see anything on your end, and it'll just click over and you'll keep working. The LandFX database itself includes the LandFX projects that you see here on the right. So these are what you create that contain a list of the objects that you place in your drawing. No physical representation of anything. It's just a list. It also contains the preferences that you set up within LandFX as well as the templates that you use for creating new projects. The LandFX folder itself, whether you're on cloud data or local data, is always hosted locally, either on the user station or on a server or in a shared online folder. So your hatches, your details, your blocks, your symbols, any custom data that you create is always hosted locally on the user's end. So here in this slide, we're taking a look at what you could potentially see when you lose a when you lose a server. So if you're on the LandFX cloud, say worst case scenario happens, you get struck by lightning and your computer hard drive fries. You can reinstall a vanilla installation of LandFX, completely empty, start up CAD, and you will have your full project list there on the left. So any LandFX project that you've created is stored on our cloud server. So anything happens, if you lost the computer, for instance, you could quickly do a brand new installation and your data's there. So that's one of the key benefits to cloud data. If you are on local data, however, and you didn't have a backup that you had access to, that project list would be empty. And you'll see here on the right, this long list of files. This is a backup that you can create with LandFX. So you'll still have your data, but you have to go down this list one file at a time and restore these to your database in order to use them. So how much time are you losing or saving going with one or the other? So it's all about disaster recovery. How can you get back to work as fast as possible? So for a single user cloud installation, this is what you're going to be seeing. You're going to have the LandFX folder, which contains all of your custom data. That's going to be stored locally on your system. So as you see, we're looking at the same default installation path. Your database, however, is hosted on our cloud server. So that all those services that are required to run like a MySQL database, et cetera, none of that applies. And again, you have that failover. So if anything happens to your local system, that project database is intact and fine. And you can also access it from X amount of systems from anywhere you go. So that's one of the benefits of using a single user cloud installation. For multi-user cloud installations, this is going to apply to multiple users or multiple workstations. You don't have to have 10 users to go with a multi-user install. You can be one person working from 2 or 3 systems. This installs the LandFX folder either on an Office server that's shared out or to a shared online folder, which is really the preferred way that we're going now. The reason being that the shared online folder keeps the LandFX folder local to your computer, so you're not tethered to a physical location. But at the same time, any changes you make are synced automatically up to the cloud, so you have an offsite backup at all times. It's great for that. Again, keeps the database with your LandFX projects on our cloud server. All those services are run from the cloud, just like you download our blocks and our symbols on demand, you access the project database. It's less maintenance. It's less work to have to maintain on your servers. You don't have to maintain that MySQL database, the service, the firewall, the application running. It adds up real quick, and most of the time it runs in the background, but when something goes wrong, who has to fix that? So one of the last key benefits of the multi-user cloud installation is you have that live database in the cloud in an emergency. So say you're set up on an Office server and that Office server goes down. While you wait for the server to be rebuilt, you could have one workstation set up with LandFX so you can continue working, and all of your products will be right there real quick. So while the server is being rebuilt, you can continue working. And then as soon as the server's finished, it reconnects to that cloud database and your changes are there. So it all goes hand in hand. So the shared online folder, this is really the recommended route for LandFX these days. We use it here in the office, and we're going to talk about why it's really a key benefit, especially combined with our cloud data. It utilizes an online storage service. You got Dropbox, OneDrive, Carbonite, Google, ShareFile, the list goes on, but depending on your storage needs, it could potentially even be free. I know many of these providers will give anywhere from 5 to 15 gigabytes of data for free. The LandFX folder itself is relatively small. Vanilla installation starts out at just a couple hundred megabytes. Depending on how much data you have in there, it can grow to a few gigs, but you could potentially get away utilizing one of these services for free. What this does is now your LandFX folder, which contains your blocks, fonts, details, and hatches, etc., is stored both on your local system, so you're not tethered to an office server anymore. So you could work at the office, and if you had to go out of town for a week, you take your laptop with you, and you can continue working the whole time because the folder's on your machine. Excuse me. At the same time, that folder, any changes you make, are synced to the cloud. So if you have, say, 3 people that are connected to this Dropbox account, and you create a custom block, that block is immediately uploaded and then downloaded to users 2 and 3's machines. So no longer have to copy that file and email it over to them or put it on a flash drive and hand it to them, and vice versa anytime you make a change. It's all automatic. It all runs in the background. Again, we're looking at the cloud-based database. So the database itself, which contains your LandFX projects, preferences, and templates, is stored on our AWS servers. So you also have that access all across the globe. And the shared align folder stores copies of the LandFX data on every machine that's set up for it. So any computer that's set up to sync that folder is going to have their own local copy of it. So a couple of reasons here to use the shared align folder. You can share files anywhere. You don't need to be in your office to share files with a coworker. You can be, you could be at home, they could be in the next state, they could be in the next country, and it'll sync as long as you have an internet connection. The service acts as a backup. So not only do you have the copy on your local system, you have a copy that's in the cloud. So if you lost your machine or, disaster hits and the machine goes down, you can take a second system, sign into that Dropbox account, for instance, and it'll download all of your files, and you'll be back up working as soon as that download's complete. You don't have to go through a backup folder and go, okay, I'm going to restore this. I'm going to copy this back over. Oh, where's that file? I can't find it. No, it's all automatic. It all runs in the background. You don't have to remember to hit a sync button. It just runs constantly while the machine is on. Again, touching on the pricing, depending on your storage needs, you could get away with no to little cost on your end. Let's see. You can also control who has access to your data. So that's an important thing these days. With the bring your own device to work scheme that a lot of companies are moving towards, you could have a user who works on their personal laptop. If they were to leave the company, they would technically have that data on their machine. So with these shared online folders, you can go in and revoke access to directories. You can just say, okay, this person's no longer here. They no longer have access, and boom, all the data pulls off. They lose write access to it. They lose read access to it. So it's a nice additional security feature that you have on top of being able to collaborate with all of your users at the same time. So this is something that's come up more recently now that we've been moving over to shared online folder. When you're working with these applications, they have various sync settings. Something that they've been doing a lot these days is called either a selective sync or a smart sync, or there's various terms for it. But essentially what it does is it creates a link to the file on your computer while they're actually stored in the cloud. So you basically have an image of the file, and when you access it, the software reaches out, downloads the file to your system so you can use it, and then as soon as you're done, it deletes it, which is fantastic for saving hard drive space if you're limited on hard drive space. The flip side of that, however, is that when you're working with a program like AutoCAD, which accesses numerous files at a time, it really drags things down where you can either be looking at a 5, 10, 15-second delay when you run a command to actually getting a response to we've seen 15, 20, 30 minutes. So this is something you definitely want to make sure to check. You want that service off. So with Dropbox, for instance, they use selective sync for the home edition. Any folder that you have checked, it stores a local copy on your system. That's what you need to make sure you use, especially if you have, our libraries are rather large. So if you've been working with it for a while, you'll have quite a large number of blocks, labels, or hatches. So oh, excuse me. So make sure the selective sync is turned on for the land effects folder so that it downloads the folder and stores a local copy on the local machine. OneDrive has a similar setting. Again, Google is going to have a similar one. ShareFile will have another one. Most of them are offering this option now, so it's something you'll definitely want to keep an eye on. So just make sure that the land effects folder is set to store a local copy. If you're not sure what the setting is, most of these providers have documentation that outlines them. They'll be able to point you in the right direction. So understanding your work environment combined with our installation options can make sure you have the right information to get land effects set up to work in the most efficient way possible for you and your office or your users. So for shared online folder and cloud data together, this is really the best recommendation we have right now. Both options are going to save you money. You don't have to maintain that database on your local server. You don't have to worry about having a server. With the shared online folder, it can fill that role. So you may have to pay for a little bit of storage depending on how much data you have, but it can act as a file server and allow you to move between locations. When you're tethered to a file server, if you go off site, you generally have to use something called a VPN to maintain that connection to the server. And lo and behold, CAD and other applications like that usually don't like working over tunnels. So this is another way to avoid that. It can also help reduce downtime, as we've discussed. The lack of having to maintain that local server and maintaining backups of that. If anything happens, you reconnect to your shared online folder, let it download the files while you go get some coffee, maybe grab some lunch. When you come back, it's done. You're ready to get back to work. Any data that's stored in the cloud remains in the cloud. So, if you, like I said, if you lose your system, your data is still in the cloud. You have it somewhere else. This layout works for a single user with one workstation, or it'll work for 100-person company to a few hundred. If you have multiple offices, you can set up your office server to sync to the shared online folder and rinse and repeat with your other offices. So if you prefer to have your users connecting to your server, you can still do that and have your offices sync between each other using that shared online folder. They're generally very easy to manage. You have an online portal where you can set up all of your permissions. You can set your sync roles. A lot of them will even offer back-end backup solutions, so you can port into it. An administrator can port into it and run backups directly from the shared online folder, so you don't have to worry about backing up each individual station's folder there. The main caveat for shared online folder and cloud data is that it requires an active internet connection. That's key. So if you have shoddy internet, that might be your deterrent. There are alternatives. You can tether a phone if you need a momentary connection just to get something done real quick. There are things like 4G modems, which basically take a SIM card. You pay for a data plan, and if you lose internet, you can just connect to that guy and continue working. So there's ways around it if you're going to be on the road and worried about your connection, or if you're worried about your internet going down momentarily. There are solutions to those particular issues. So switching to cloud data, if you've already done a local install, do you have to reinstall? The simple answer is no, definitely not. It's very easy to switch from local data to cloud data. There's no extra cost for the user. It's included as part of our license agreement. So as long as you have a active support contract with LandFX, you have access to our cloud data. If you are interested in switching to cloud, reach out to our support team and we'll make sure to get you everything you need to make it happen. Well, thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. This is our support team. We're happy to help answer any questions or, give you any answers if you have any. Jeremiah, did we have any questions?
We had some really good questions, and so we definitely have some time. So people, please feel free to start typing in additional questions. I sent you a Slack link which addressed the first question, and actually, well, really, both these questions are regarding the AWS server locations. But Elda, who's located in Peru, was curious, kind of how that would work down there. And I just kind of mentioned our various server locations that we've chosen from AWS, and the beauty is that we can spool up additional ones as necessary. But Ben, are you able to pull up that web page of that link?
Yeah, I've got it up here.
It's not showing. I'm only seeing the presentation.
Gotcha. Let me
so in that case, as an example, which in looking at the map, I can definitely see, as we were to get more users in South America, I can absolutely see needing to spool up a location, which is actually in the Sao Paulo city. And then similarly, someone else asked, what if their company has a restriction on storing the cloud data only in the United States? That is a trickier one. We don't have an option to do that. All the data is synchronized across. So yeah, now that you can see on the screen, Bennett's pulled that up. Those are all the AWS server locations currently available, and obviously you can see there's more ones coming. Previously, they said there was one heading for Dubai. It seems now they've changed their plans, and it's going to be coming to Bahrain. I know we have a number of users in the Mideast, and so that was one of the ones we were waiting for. Currently, we have the Singapore location that, depending on this new Bahrain data center, we might replace the Singapore location with Bahrain. And then as soon as I see the Beijing location has come online, and Hong Kong is still pending. And so that's our decision there, is if we need one in Beijing and Hong Kong, or only one of the two, and if only one of the two, one of them. But that is the beauty of the cloud data, is any one of these we can spool up a new location and the data is replicated across them. And so you can see, certainly for that user in Peru, who is probably going to be connecting to the Western US location, that it would be nice if we eventually get that Sao Paulo location online. And then we have another question just popped in from Kevin, asking if the LandFX on the cloud can handle multiple releases of AutoCAD, preserving file format differences. And I think it's very important, again, to stress that the LandFX cloud is only the data. So it has nothing to do with the DWG files. So your DWG files are still staying wherever you save them. We're not taking your DWG files and uploading them to our cloud. You keep your DWG files. We're only concerned with the data. Anything that's inside of a LandFX dialog box, so like the name of the plant and the how wide it is and the name of the symbol that you've chosen for it, that data is what is getting uploaded to the cloud. But the DWG file is all yours. So that being said, you can have any mix and match of different AutoCAD versions in either case, whether local data or cloud data, and it won't matter. And then, well, Tyler popped in with kind of an unrelated question. And so regarding SketchUp, so to let him know, we're definitely going to get his question routed over to technical support, and we'll get that one addressed. But did you have any other last thoughts here, Bennett?
I think you already touched base on it, but yeah, the main thing is when talking about land effects cloud data is that we're only talking about the land effects projects, preferences, and templates. So that's just going to be the lists of your planting and irrigation equipment that you've used. There's no visual representation of that data that's stored in that database.
That's right. And so, yeah, so certainly to the anonymous attendee who asked a very good question about the restrictions and what the company offers, we know of a couple who are in that exact same boat. And we also know of another international firm, which they did finally, their legal team did finally sign off on it. We've seen on both sides. And so we have seen successfully getting a company to sign off on that restriction on, basically getting through to their legal department of what is stored in the database, and then finally the legal department said, oh, okay, sure. So that's absolutely what could happen. And then that same anonymous attendee also just asked again, um, is are those restrictions available via OneDrive? And that I'm not sure. Do you know, Bennett, if you can restrict OneDrive to which server locations are used?
I'm not sure if OneDrive will let you restrict based on region. I know that they offer the same kind of file and sharing permissions that the others do, where you can lock it down by user. But yeah, I'm honestly not sure if you can lock it down by region.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be kind of tricky because I know pretty much any of these cloud providers, like certainly with that image still up on the map, and with us using this, it is very handy to there's some really fat fiber optic pipes coming from the Bay Area. US over to Japan and Asia, and being able to have that backup level to be able to be replicating all that very important data that they're hosting in different countries. So,
Yeah, I
so
know.
I'm
I
not.
know if you're really concerned with security, you may want to take a look at ShareFile. I know that they have a fairly large emphasis on file security, so they may give you the option to lock down your sharing permissions based off of the server location.
Exactly. Um, that being said, I think that's about all we have. Um, and Gosh, yeah, sorry, I was just making sure we got all the rest of these. But any other additional questions, uh, shoot them over to us. Otherwise, have a great weekend. And a reminder again that this is recorded and will be available on Monday.
Alrighty, thank you, everyone.